The bustle-tailed tree.
Look east.
Intelligence that I've never known before in a parrot is just way beyond any of the other birds that we've ever had.
Now, you told me he plays basketball, is that right?
Yes, it's about 18 months ago when I first taught him to play basketball, and I can honestly say since 18 months ago he's never missed the basket once.
Now, how does he get about? He's got various ways of getting about, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, when we're training them, obviously the birds are working outside in the zoo in the summer and they have to have the wings clipped, so he needs his transport, and Pharaoh's favourite and the best is his scooter.
So what's his big party piece then, having seen all these amazing things he can do?
I think his speciality must be the roller skating, and I can honestly say that is the only knock-kneed parrot in captivity that can perform this trick.
Knock-kneed parrots indeed, whatever next. Duck-toed spuggies, no doubt. That's all from Grassroots. Next week, David Parry-Jones will be skating into the...
Creates tiny living trees in perfect miniature, often no more than a few inches high. One of a handful of authentic bonsai gardens to be found outside Japan is at Brampton in Norfolk. There they not only exhibit but also sell bonsai trees. But be warned, small doesn't necessarily mean cheap, and some of the rarer examples can cost several £1,000s. Chris Young reports from Brampton.
The Norfolk Bonsai Centre is the proud creation of teacher Andy Tate, who fell in love with the miniature Japanese trees while studying Eastern art. His collection of more than 400 trees is laid out on the lines of a traditional Japanese bonsai garden. Half of them is imported from Japan, although the trees need not be of Eastern origin. The seedling of just about any ordinary tree, properly trained, can produce a miniature. It takes careful pruning, plus pieces of wire to persuade the branches to grow in the shape of fully mature trees. Customers travel from many parts of Britain to buy from Andy's collection. Prices range from under £1 for seedlings to thousands of pounds for the rarest specimens.
Now this really does look just like a miniature silverbird, doesn't it?
Yes, it's an interesting tree because this one is not from abroad. This is from Norfolk, from some moorland close by, and it's been naturally dwarfed by the soils in the area. It's about 25 years old, already displaying some lovely white bark, and gradually the whole tree will reduce down in size and we'll get the smaller leaves.
But bonsai trees are not simply miniature varieties. You have to train them.
That's right. It's often people think wrongly that bonsai trees are miniature species in themselves, and if they leave them on their own they will remain small. But it's a way. You have to prune them into shape and keep them small. You can't ever neglect them.
So left to its own, that could shoot up?
That's right. If that was put back into good soil in the ground, it could go back up to 20, 30 feet. This is one of our pride and joys of the collection. It's a masterpiece tree from Japan. It's very old indeed. It's got a recorded age of between 150 and 180 years. It's only been with us for a few months now. It came in before Christmas from Nagoya in Japan, where it was looked after by a private Japanese family, one of their collection.
Beautiful bark, isn't it?
It's got a lovely bark, yes. It's even the little twigs, which you can't see because they're hidden now by the foliage. It's got really old plated bark that the pine tree has.
How much would you want if somebody was prepared to buy that?
Well, because it is a masterpiece tree winning competitions in Japan, it would be extremely expensive, something in the region of about £4,000.
And how easy, having paid £4,000 for a little tree like that, would it be to kill it off?
With a tree of this age, quite easy to not look after it properly, because it is so old, and like most old things, it's reached a very delicate stage.
A classic cedar, yet somehow more beautiful than ever in miniature.
Yes, it's a Japanese cedar, the Cryptomeria japonica. It's a younger tree. It's about 45 years old, but a very lovely example. It's been very carefully trained so that the branches are in just the right places throughout the whole tree, and a lovely tapering trunk from the bottom to the top. This tree, which is trained as most people think of bonsai, in the very classical informal upright style, with the main branches in layers, is a Chinese juniper from the mountains in China. Very lovely soft green foliage.
And that shape is acquired simply by training?
That's right. Normally in the ground this would just be a straight whip of a tree with a few branches off, but through careful wiring of the shape can be transformed into this sort of flowing design.
Seedlings need constant attention if they're to grow into fine bonsai specimens. Daily watering, regular feeding, correct pinching back or pruning. It'll be several years before the tree has recognisable characteristics. But then, say bonsai lovers, there's a lifetime of untold pleasure and peace to be enjoyed from the perfect miniature.
Chris Young with the bonsai trees in Brampton. The waters of one of Essex
will go towards a new laboratory to enable early diagnosis. Now soccer, and the Norwich City Board of Directors have agreed to a transfer request for Kevin Bond, their 23-year-old captain. Bond, an England B international, has asked for a transfer because of the bad feeling created at the club when his father John Bond left to take over as manager of Manchester City. But he will play for Norwich against Crystal Palace at Carrow Road tomorrow night. And finally, Norwich Amenities have introduced a scheme to keep school children occupied during their holidays, a mobile skating rink. It's made of plastic, specially coated to make it slippery. Today's first session was in Blackfriars Hall. In future, it'll travel to other halls and community centres in the city. Ordinary ice skates are provided. The scheme looks a winner. 300 used the rink this afternoon, some more skillfully than others.
Now, as you may have seen in the national news, there's no sign of an early end to the prison officers' dispute. In fact, relations between the two sides have worsened, with the publication this afternoon of the bill giving the Home Secretary, Mr. Whitelaw, wide powers to use troops to keep prisons open. In the eastern counties, the situation is deteriorating fast, with hundreds of prisoners now locked in police cells. With the latest details, here's Carol West.
The Home Secretary's emergency measures will allow temporary prisons to be set up to deal with the growing crisis. And the region's army headquarters at Colchester is being strongly tipped as one such site. The corrective training centre at the camp houses men from all three services who've been given terms of detention by a court-martial. The centre was recently considered by the Home Office as a possible location for short, sharp shock measures against teenage hooligans. And it's believed that several members of the team which runs the centre will be used to organise the country's temporary jails. The irony of the situation is that permanent prisons are now less overcrowded because of the dispute. At Bedford Prison, the governor said today that it was no longer necessary to put 3 men to a cell because there were fewer prisoners. And in Norwich, the prison's normal quota is about 400 men, but the number now is around 300. The workshops are closed and more recreation has been organised. At Norwich Police Station, a spokesman said they were coping adequately. However, 2 men escaped from Corby Police Station last week and are still on the run. Blunderston Prison is unaffected by the dispute, according to the Home Office, because it acts mainly as a training centre and it doesn't take prisoners from local courts. Mr. Eldon Griffiths, the MP for Bury St Edmunds, spoke in the debate this afternoon as parliamentary advisor to the Police Federation and welcomed the temporary prisons. Mr. Griffiths said conditions in police station cells were appalling, with 3 people to a cell and problems with food and sanitation. But as a constituency MP, Mr. Griffiths said he was concerned about the situation at Stradishall Prison in Suffolk. Stradishall was set up as a low-security prison, but violent prisoners were sometimes held there because of accommodation problems. And the MP warned that if high-risk prisoners were sent there as a result of the prison officers' dispute, he would insist that soldiers were sent to Stradishall to guard them and ensure there was no risk to people in the area.
The worsening situation in the eastern counties. Well, only this month, the government's new Housing Act came into force, giving every council tenant the right to buy his own home. But in practice, for some tenants, it's not that easy. Yarmouth's Labour-dominated Housing Committee has voted to defy the government and tell Whitehall to do the job itself. And in Cambridge, the Labour-controlled City Council has launched a controversial campaign to point out the pitfalls of buying your own home, as John Kiddie reports.
Council houses in Cambridge have been sold periodically over the past 20 years, although none have been sold in the last 2 years. The present Labour-controlled administration is against selling on principle, and a leaflet soon to be sent out to would-be buyers urges people to think hard before exercising their right to purchase. This is a draft copy of the document causing the controversy, published by the Cambridge City Council. It consists of a series of questions and answers about such things as the level of income and the amount of each mortgage repayment. This, meanwhile, is a document published by the Department of the Environment called The Right to Buy. The Cambridge document's called Are You Right to Buy? This also consists of a series of questions and answers. And the argument is, could these two documents be confused? The chief critic of the leaflet lives in a council house he bought some years ago.
Well, I think whereas the questions that they're asking really are right ones, the questions that perhaps a normal advisor would ask, I think it's premature. The time to decide whether they can afford to buy or they are right to buy, as they say, is at the time when all of the individual facts have been gone into, not just a general blanket statement that is supposed to cover everybody.
Perhaps, though, there is too much pressure on people to buy at the moment, is there?
No, I don't think so. I don't think it's ever a bad time to make an investment for a stake for your future.
So is the council trying to put people off buying?
We are against the sale of council houses under the present situation, with a moratorium on building council houses, reduction in money being allowed to us to build houses and to improve houses, and with a growing waiting list.
But you own your house, your fellow councillors own their houses. Why shouldn't other people own their houses?
There's no reason why people shouldn't own their houses. I believe that people should have the opportunity to buy their own houses, but not council houses at the situation. If we had a glut of council houses, yes, that'd be fair enough. But as I say, the waiting list is so long and increasing, we've got to think of people, particularly young married people. I mean, I can quote instance after instance of people who cannot get a house and they're on the council list for 2 years or more.
Your pamphlet called Are You Right to Buy, and the Department of the Environment's pamphlet, The Right to Buy, look very similar. Was that deliberate?
Well, there's a common theme through the two documents, yes.
But, I mean, do you want to confuse people?
No, certainly that's the last thing we want to do. We want to put before them the facts, the financial facts, of what they may run into when buying their houses.
Do you think it will put people off?
If a person is determined to buy their house, nothing will put them off. But I think it will make people think twice when they see they're not just paying out a weekly mortgage. On top of that, they've got to pay insurance, surveyor's fees, the equivalent to the repairs which we are paying for the council, and it goes up quite considerably.
To buy or not to buy, the continuing saga. Well, now, what kind of potted plants would you expect to find in an ordinary house? Swiss cheese, ivy, fern, oak tree? Oak tree, you say? Well, it's not as silly as it sounds, not if you follow the ancient tradition of bonsai, the Japanese practice of growing miniature trees. Now, this art form is being encouraged in Norfolk, where a bonsai association is being set up. It's the idea of Andrew Tate, who came to the studio earlier, along with a selection of his very best trees. Andrew, what is it that is so appealing about bonsai trees?
Well, I think it's the fact that you can appreciate a full-size tree in a miniature form. You can bring it into your home, enjoy the seasons, enjoy the spring, and then when the buds form, and enjoy the autumn seasons when the colours change.
Yes, now talking about seasons, that is one of the most surprising things that I've learnt this afternoon, is that your bonsai tree actually enjoys the same seasons that your tree growing outside in the garden. Take, for example, this particular one that you brought along here appears to be going through its autumn system. It's de-leafing, it's browning.
Yes, they follow exactly the same seasons as a full-size tree. That one now, with the current winds we've had and the cold weather, is beginning to lose its leaves. They've turned nice yellows, and they'll be going through oranges and reds, and eventually dropping.
How long does it take to get a bonsai tree to this particular stage? I mean, it actually looks like a tree. Half close your eyes and you could imagine that it was a full-size one in the garden.
Well, that particular tree is about 60 years old. And it's been in training for about 40 years. So many years in this country by me, and before that, about 30 years, 40 years in Japan.
So is there any point in bringing a bonsai on from the seed stage? Because you're going to have to wait an awful long time to see the results of your work, aren't you?
You are. But on the other hand, there's a tremendous amount of enjoyment in actually doing bonsai as a bonsai culture. And although you can appreciate a fully grown tree and just maintain it as a tree when they are small and growing, it takes about 7 years, I suppose, to get a seedling which looks like a little tree.
Yes, so you can
but
actually
it won't be as
sit
thick
back
as that, of course.
No. Well, let's take the next example, which is near to your arm. And whilst you're telling us about that example, tell us what is the secret of actually getting a bonsai tree to stay like that? Because am I not right in saying that if you don't prune it, eventually it will return to the normal and want to reach for the sky?
Yes, this is a Japanese white pine, and it's one of the standard trees used in bonsai in Japan and throughout the whole world. This tree is about 40 to 50 years old. Pines, of course, are much slower growers. But if this tree was not pruned, its root pruned, and the top treated, it would eventually get pot-bound and would starve itself out.
Very briefly, give us an idea about the cost. How much would it cost us to buy a bonsai tree?
Bonsai trees vary very much indeed. If you wanted to buy a seedling to start, you might pay sort of about £1 or so for a tree, or you can pay the other extreme and pay hundreds, thousands for a specimen tree, especially trained in Japan.
Yes, in fact, I did read about one that fetched £6,000, actually.
I think that's
it was
about the record.
500 years old.
Yes,
Is that the record?
Yes.
Fascinating stuff, and thank you very, very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now a brief look at some more of the region's news. Further layoffs have just been announced by the Perkins Diesel Engine Company at Peterborough. 450 men have lost their jobs after the closure of some assembly lines caused by a drop in demand. Perkins have already stood off 900 of their 7,000 workers. Figures issued today by the Lincolnshire Police Force show the county's crime rate has risen by almost 10% during the first 9 months of this year.
Includes a saving of £140,000 on staff costs. A top-level